Thank you, Ms. Hale. Good afternoon. This is the Town of Southborough, Massachusetts Personnel Board meeting. It's a virtual meeting via Zoom, Wednesday, July 14th, 2021, 12 p.m. Welcome, everyone. Our clerk, Ms. Jasinski, we are being called to order at 12 p.m. Our clerk, Ms. Jasinski, would you care to read the required order? It's changed. But it is at the top of the agenda.
Sure. Pursuant to Senate Bill number 2475, which was signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner: by following the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. Lovely job. So welcome everyone back to Zoom. Last month on June 23rd, we had our first in-person meeting in many months, and it was agreed for the summer we would go back to virtual being an option for us. This is not necessarily a permanent change. Oh, Mr. Dietz is reporting on the chat that his audio is not working and he cannot hear anything. I don't know, how do we fix that problem? I guess maybe he
sometimes that happens.
Exit and come back in. All right. All right. Let's give Mr. Dietz a moment to exit the meeting and try to come back in. Dorianne, if you're keeping a list of pros and cons, in-person versus virtual meeting, put this down on the list under in-person meeting pros.
Yes, I would prefer live and in person, but
all right.
We will put that down. We will note it.
Okay, thank you. In the interim, we could talk about the weather, but that's too depressing, so let's not. All right, Mr. Dietz can hear us. Thank you, Mr. Dietz. All right, so where were we? We may return to in-person. We're just going to try the virtual meetings in August. And as a result of being virtual, this meeting is being recorded and all votes will again be by roll call. Thank you. First order of business, administrative. We have draft minutes in the packet at pages 1 to 4. This is the meeting from June 23rd. These minutes were circulated in advance of the meeting to the board, therefore reading is waived. Do I have any comments or corrections on the minutes of June 23rd? I see the two other members who are present at the meeting shaking their heads. Thank you very much. There being no comments or corrections, the minutes of June 23rd are approved as presented in the packet by the chair. Thank you all. All right, item number 2. You have a couple of budget matters in the packet at pages 5 and 6. The first item on page 5 is your expenditure ledger. Believe it or not, this is the year end for FY21. And the number that you see under year-to-date unexpended balance, that is what will be returned to the general treasury that was not spent. If you're anything like me, you look at the budget and you say, okay, where did the money go? And I did that in the sheet that is in page 6 of the packet. Just pulled this right out of the expenditure reports that are supplied by the town accountant. It's just a summary of the expenditures. And you can see the bottom line came out in the same place as the town accountant, but this is just a listing to show you of where the money was spent. Any questions from the board on pages 5 and 6? All right, the chair hearing no comment, we will move on. All right, the next order of business on our agenda is board organization. This is an annual item under section 16C of the bylaw. We meet in order to choose a chair and a clerk.
I nominate Betsy Rosenblum for chair.
Second,
All those in favor, roll call vote.
Is there a motion? Chair will entertain a motion to elect herself as chair of the personnel board. This will be by roll call. All right, Ms. Jasinski,
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes,
Mr. Dietz. Mr. Dietz, could you take yourself off mute, please? We have to record your vote. You are still muted, sir.
I'm actually off mute talking through my phone, but maybe my phone won't let me talk through it. I don't know.
We can hear you. How do you vote on the
Yeah,
pending
but
motion?
what I'm saying is, right, what I was saying is I called in through my phone, so I just assumed I could talk through my phone and leave this on mute, which doesn't seem to be the case.
We can hear you now. Technology is beyond me. We have a motion on the table. Did you hear the motion?
Yep, I am 1,000% of me not doing it and you doing it all.
All right, I'll take that as an affirmative. The chair votes in the affirmative.
yeah.
It is unanimous. I guess I thank the board for their confidence. I question my sanity and thank the board for their confidence. All right. The chair will entertain a motion to elect Dorian Jasinski as clerk of the Personnel Board for FY22.
So
So
Do I
moved.
have a second? All right, this will be by roll call. Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes,
Mr. Dietz,
Yes,
Ms. Rosenblum, yes. Ms. Jasinski, would you care to vote?
Yes.
All right, it is unanimous. Thank you for taking on this charge, Ms. Jasinski.
It's
All
a tough
right,
job. Somebody's got to do it.
all right. And the last item I have under administrative business is we're in a new fiscal year. That means a new version of the SAP. We thank Ms. Esposito on behalf of the board. I thank her for posting the new bylaw. It can be found on the Town of Southborough website on the Personnel Board webpage. And we also had a couple of policies that we passed. And thanks to Ms. Hale for posting those on our webpage. They can be found under policies. And that's it for administrative. On to reports, chair's report. Just a couple of quick follow-up items. Like to keep these on the chalkboard so we don't forget about them. Still have some questions as a result of a June 9th discussion about hiring. It was about the IT position, but then it became not about an IT position or a particular position, but just a matter of our board understanding the different buckets under which Mr. Ballantyne and Mr. Purple have authority to hire services for the town of Southborough. I sent them a memo, had some follow-up email. I've asked that we have a meeting. I would invite Mr. Rubenstein, have invited Mr. Rubenstein to be my second. I still don't have the clarity that I hope to have. And I hope to be able to schedule a meeting with Mr. Purple following this meeting, get something on the calendar so we can resolve for once and for all. So we're all on the same page about independent contractors, employees with W-2s, and there may be a third category called contracted services, which I think we understood is under Chapter 30 under the procurement law. But on the June 9th meeting, Mr. Purple suggested hiring someone under a contract, potentially with benefits. which would make them, some folks believe, an employee. So we want to explore that further. Haven't had a chance to do that, and I will follow up with you in August. Second item follow-up is the Section 11 benefits review. This is ongoing. Ms. Hale continues to collect information from other communities, external comps, which she has shared with Ms. Jasinski and myself. And Ms. Jasinski, Ms. Hale, and myself will be meeting after this meeting on that continuing item. Thanks again to Vanessa for continuing to sort through all this and pass it on to us. And I will have an update on progress at our next meeting. Last item on my chair's report, DEI training. You may recall this was an initiative of the Board of Selectmen, and we agreed to co-sponsor. The DEI training is being held by a woman named Callie Ritter of Positive Ripple. She also has a partner, Siobhan, whose last name escapes me. Hang on. It's Callie Ritter and Siobhan Drayton. It's a 3-part training, hour and a half for each training. I attended, it's all by Zoom. I attended on behalf of Personnel Board yesterday, the first of the 3 installments. It was very well attended. I counted, I don't know, I guess about 18 people. Vanessa was there, Mark was there, Mr. Ballantyne was there, although he had a pseudonym for purposes of the meeting, and we will explore that alter identity at a later time with Mr. Ballantyne. It was very well done, and I will get a slideshow of all of it, and maybe I can share that with you after we've done the 3 parts. But most of the department heads were present, and I appreciated being allowed to audit the course. I will tell you, I logged on early to tell the trainer that I did not intend to participate. I was there to audit on behalf of Personnel Board, and she, not knowing me, had to encourage that I should take the talking stick during the training. And I explained to her that most of my interactions in life, I have the talking stick 99% of the time, and I had no need to take the talking stick yesterday. So, but it was well attended, and I look forward to the next 2 sessions. That's it for my chair's report. I turn it over to Ms. Hale for the Assistant Town Administrator report.
Thank you. We don't have a new hire report in your packet this month, but I wanted to give the board a quick update on the recruitments we're working on right now. The Board of Selectmen did appoint a new full-time maintenance technician in facilities last night. So you'll see that in your report in the August meeting packet. That's hot off the press. So we're happy about that. We do have several recruitments going on right now. One for a part-time administrative assistant in the Council on Aging, one for a part-time business assistant to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That vacancy is created by the promotion of Katie Barry to the Selectman's office, so we're backfilling her position. And the last is a full-time recreation program coordinator. So we are in the midst of reviews for 2 out of the 3 of those right now. So I hope to have more information to share on final appointments with you next month.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Any questions from Ms. Hale on that report? Okay, please continue.
We have requested a copy of an updated FMLA policy from our Labor Council. I have not received that yet. But we are in conversations with the selectmen about Labor Council services for the duration of the year. So I have not received that yet, but that is pending.
Thank you. And I continue, just as I do for my follow-up items, I keep putting this on Vanessa's agenda. I apologize that you have to keep saying the same thing, but it was important. It was a big discussion several months ago, so I just want to make sure it doesn't get lost. And I find it easier if I put it on there, you give us a report, it gets in the minutes, and then we all know it's something that continues to be something we should keep on our radar. Thank you. You all set? Anything else?
All set. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. All right. So we are on to old business 4. Under additional employment performance evaluations and annual salary increases, this is our third and last discussion of salary increases for FY '22. And you may recall in our packet last month, there was a request. It's in the packet this month at page 7. This is a request from Mr. Hegarty, our town clerk, for a salary increase effective July 1st for his election workers and wardens. At our June 23rd meeting, we had to table it. There were only 3 members of the board present, and Ms. Jasinski had to recuse herself. So I'm happy to see that we're joined by Mr. Nixon and Mr. Dietz, and we can take this up again.
And I
It is
still have to
page-
recuse myself. I'm still
Thank you. Your
recusing
recusal
myself.
is so noted. Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. The chair will entertain, I'm going to take these separately. The chair will entertain a motion to approve a salary increase effective July 1, 2021 for election workers, Schedule C, Grade 1, from a current hourly rate of $12.29 to a new rate of $12.63, an increase of 2.8. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second,
All right. This will be by roll call. Mr. Dietz,
approve.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and the chair votes in the affirmative. The raise is approved 4-0, 1 abstention. Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve a salary increase effective July 1st, 2021 for election wardens, Schedule C, Grade 2, from $12.97 per hour to $33.33 per hour, a 2.8% increase. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. This will be by roll call. Mr. Dietz. Mr. Dietz? Can't hear you. We have to hear you on the recording, Mr. Dietz. Mr. Dietz
Yes.
has, I think we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yes,
All right, we got you. All right, Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. It is so approved by a vote of 4-0 to 1 abstention. Thank you all. I don't see, Ms. Hale, was Mr. Hegarty present? I don't.
He is not.
All right. It was rather a pro forma matter, so I would expect that's fine. And I will relate to him. All right. So under raises and performance evaluations, we have just one more performance appraisal. This is for Charles Goodwin, part-time police dispatcher. This review was uploaded to the files. There was a correction on the raise requested to 2.8. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve a 2.8% salary increase for Charles Goodwin from a current hourly rate of $23 an hour to $23.64 effective July 1, 2021. I guess I should have asked if there was any discussion on the performance evaluation. I'm seeing a shaking of heads. All right. Do I hear this motion?
Motion so moved.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. This will be a roll call vote on Charles Goodwin. All right. Ms. Jasinski,
Yes.
Mr. Dietz,
yes,
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes.
and the chair, Ms. Rosenblum, votes in the affirmative. Thank you all. I believe, Vanessa, that is the last of our performance evaluations for 2021. Thank you all for that. Okay. Next item, we go to, we have one item of old business, but if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to jump ahead to 5A. We have a request from Facilities Department for a vacation advancement. I feel that that is a pretty straightforward matter. Ms. Hale, do we have Mr. Parent present? Would you bring him into our meeting, please?
Just having trouble bringing him over. Just a minute.
All right, take whatever time you need.
There he is.
Would he like us to see his face? Mr. Parent, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can't see you, which
I
is,
can start the video. Let's see how good it is here.
all right.
There he
Kind
is.
of buried on my desk.
We crave human interaction, Mr. Parent. Nice to see you.
How you doing?
So I hope you don't mind. I'm jumping ahead. We're on the packet at page 8. Before we finish up our old business, I thought we could dispense with your request.
Okay.
To advance, we have a new hire in the, why don't you tell us I'll give you the floor and you can sum up your request.
Basically, we have a new hire that's scheduled to start on August 2nd. He has in excess of the 5 years required of municipal experience to bump him to his annual earning of 3 weeks of vacation time per year from the customary 2 weeks, and basically just putting the request out there to get that approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Parent. Any questions for Mr. Parent before we move? All right, the chair will entertain a motion to advance Robert Esposito in the vacation schedule set forth in SAP Section 11B1 from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, as allowed by SAP Section 11B2, based on his 6 years of prior employment in a similar position. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Thank you. This will be by roll call vote. Mr. Dietz,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Ms. Jazinski,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenblum also votes in the affirmative. All right. Mr. Parent, you have your 3 weeks vacation. Your employee. And
I don't want to go back to 3. It took a long time to get to 4.
yes, understood. Thank you for bringing this to our attention and good luck to the new employee. We look forward to meeting him and more importantly, to his success here in Southborough. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great one.
All right, you too. All right, so. I want to go back for a minute if I can. We'll finish up old business before we get on to all the exciting new business with the IT department. So this discussion is aimed mostly at Mr. Nixon and Mr. Dietz, who are not present at our last meeting. Mr. Rubenstein, Ms. Jazinski are familiar with it. There's nothing new in the packet. Mr. Nixon, Mr. Dietz, I would draw your attention to the minutes of our packet at pages 2 to 3, specifically the discussion at lines 109 to 139. So in the context of discussing a second IT position, a topic came up about whether or not we could hire more than one manager into the position of IT manager. Beyond any discussion of IT, it begs the question of whether or not you can hire more than one employee into any of the positions in Schedule A. So very briefly, under the definition section, Schedule A is a classification table. Therefore, all the titles listed in Section A are classifications. The definition section also says that classes have more than one employee. So under this logical argument, all the titles listed in Schedule A have to have more than one employee. All right? So I'm asking you to separate out any management aspect. Separate out whether or not you think we should have 2 or more of anything. The question is not, does it make sense from a management position to have 2 managers or 2 directors? The question is, does the SAP allow it? We had this discussion at the last meeting. Mr. Rubenstein and I took the position that theoretically, nothing in the SAP prevents you from having more than one of any of those positions, more than one employee in any one of those positions. Ms. Jasinski took a slightly different tack. She said as a member of the personnel board, she cannot separate out management from SAP interpretation, that having 2 IT managers would be chaotic, and she would not support chaos in the personnel board. So I open it up to you gentlemen. If you want more time to think about the issue as I laid it out, I don't know that it will continue to, we're going to talk about the IT department hire shortly. I don't know that this issue will even be relevant in that context, but it brought to the fore a somewhat important issue I felt of SAP interpretation and wanted to know how you all felt about that. So I open it up to Mr. Dietz and Mr. Nixon. Would love to hear from you.
Quick question. If there's two IT managers, do both of them have direct reports, or is, because you can easily have a manager that's not managing people, that's a totally different job. So are they different jobs both at a manager level?
Great question, Jay. What determines manager in our classification system is the level of responsibility, level of education. You know how we rate positions. So I could foresee, let's just take IT. I don't know anything about IT. You could have someone who manages one aspect of IT, several aspects of IT, a different man. All it says to me is that they are at the same level, relatively the same level of responsibility, of education, of experience, consequences to the town, and that whatever the job descriptions are for those employees, they fit into the same grade. They're doing like enough work. It doesn't have to be the same work, but in the same way that we have more than one employee at a grade 8. We have Miss Hale. Sorry, I always make an example of you because you're sitting up there next to me on the screen. Vanessa's at a grade 8 with a very different job description than the IT manager, but they both found their way to grade 8 under the SAP when we examined their job descriptions and rated and classified them. So no, it doesn't have to be two identical IT managers with the same job. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the same job, then what's the difference if you have two of them or not? One's managing programs and systems and the other one's managing people. They're still the same grade, but they're different jobs.
And the question goes beyond ITJ. The question is a matter of SAP interpretation. Does the SAP allow, and again, maybe it'd be helpful if we broaden it and if everyone has their SAP, let's get off of IT manager and let's
I'm
look
just
at,
using that as an example. I mean, it could be for anything.
yeah, let's look at any of the positions. Director of facilities. Can you have two of those? Can you have two library directors? The
If
SAP
they're doing
tells,
different jobs, sure.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a management question. Mark told us at the last meeting, as a practical matter, any department within his jurisdiction, he's never going to recommend that there's two managers doing the same thing. And we appreciate that and we understand that. He's a manager, he's an operations guy. We're the SAP administrators and interpreters. So our job is just to tell people, this all started because folks with an interest in IT called me and said, what is possible under the existing SAP? That's how the whole thing started. I just assumed you could hire as many employees as you wanted to into any of those positions until Dorianne told me she looked at it differently. That's why this discussion is on the table. So that's why I want to hear from Mr. Dietz and Mr. Nixon. Mr. Nixon, you look perplexed. Do you have
No,
anything you want?
not perplexed. I was listening. Is there in essence a duplication of positions here? I mean, did it mean that we needed two people of equal stature, so to speak, in that department?
Great question. And not one that this board answered. Not one that I think this board is supposed to answer. I think we're just supposed to look at, the SAP tells us under section 3, no new position shall be added to the SAP and no position reclassified unless and until this board rates and classifies it. So if somebody wants to add a new position in the IT department, our job is to figure out where it goes. So the question is, if the folks with the hiring authority wanted 2 grade 8 employees, would we have to create a new position in IT? Or could you hire someone at grade 8 into the position of IT manager. And again, to take it away from IT, could we hire more than one? Because I don't really want to talk about how we manage the IT department, because that's not what this is all about. The IT position brought this question to the fore, but it's really a matter of SAT interpretation. And when Dorianne had her say, she was very strongly influenced by how she feels that a SAP department should be run. It could not have two managers. And so for that reason, I want to kind of take it away, back it up. Theoretically, can we hire more than one employee? And the one piece of this that we haven't discussed, but which is in the minutes, is during my tenure on this board, the board has added positions to the SAP. And we've never looked at the definition section and said, oh, this is a position that can only have one employee. It's a position, one employee. Or it's a class that can have more than one employee. Some of them are obvious: administrative assistant, business administrator. Everyone commonly understands there's more than one of those. Maybe not so common whether you could have two library directors and this is born of the necessity, not the necessity. The problem with the SAP is it only allows us to hire people once a year. One town meeting approves of a new position. So we're just trying to import some flexibility into it. I see that I try to personally interpret the SAP to give as much flexibility to people as I can. If there's a grade 8 IT position that already exists, I don't want to go to town meeting to get another grade 8 IT position. I want to let the folks who make these decisions, do the hiring, and come up with the funding. I want them to hire what they need. I guess, I don't know what you call that, Barry, in the law, but I want to avoid having to amend the statute, if I can read it expansively in good faith, to do what I need it to do.
Well, the other question I had was, is that a requirement of the individual that they're hiring, that he come in at that pay level, and was that part of the discussion with him, that he would be brought in as a grade 8 employee?
I'm not explaining this well. There's no person. It came up in the context of discussing a second position, which hasn't been graded, rated, nobody's hired for it.
Okay.
And because it came up in the context of IT, it became associated with IT, but I want to take it away from IT. It is strictly a matter of SAP interpretation. Maybe you cannot answer the question. That's where Dorianne fell out. She said, I'm not going to answer it as a question of SAP interpretation, because I'm never going to interpret the SAP in a way that I feel leads to managerial chaos. And Barry and I said, that's for a manager to decide. Our job is to decide what authority the personnel board has via the SAP to allow or not allow. But we don't do the hire. We don't say to Mark, gee, Mark, that's a bad management decision to have two managers in that department. That's his job. That's what he gets paid for. Our job is to say what the SAP allows, plain and simple. I'm not trying to complicate it more than that.
Right.
There's no candidate. Nobody's been promised anything. In fact, we're going to look at a job description for the IT department in just a minute. And maybe you don't have a position. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, if there's nothing that prohibits in the SAP from they having two managers at the same pay level, then it seems like it would be okay to proceed on that basis. I just think that from a managerial standpoint, having co-equal managers without defining specifically what their responsibilities are is sort of treading in dangerous area.
That isn't what we would be doing. What we're saying is the SAP gives the hiring authority and the manager the right to come before us with a job description for a position for more than one employee within that category. Just as they would if you go down the list. They could come in and say, we need 2 assistant town clerks. We need 2 outreach coordinators. We need 2 business administrators. We may already have those. We need more than 1 staff engineer. Clearly, there are positions here that already have more than 1 employee. The question is, can we have more than 1 employee in any of them? We are not answering a managerial question about whether or not it's a good idea to do it. So if I feel the sense of the board is there's 3 of us who say, yeah, the SAP doesn't prohibit it. Dorianne, who feels it's inappropriate, at least in the case of IT, and she would manage it on a case-by-case basis. And I'm not sure where you're falling out, Mr. Nixon.
I'd go along with it. No,
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments or concerns? I just wanted to tuck this away because it may come up in the future. Someone may come in and say, Jim Hegarty may come to us and say, I've got an admin assistant position, but what I really need is 2 assistant town clerks. Can we do it? And I will have this discussion. We'll have it under our belt. It doesn't mean you won't get to review it in that case. But the question is theoretically whether or not that possibility exists.
I have a question.
Certainly, Ms. Jasinski.
How can you have a department that's a 1-person department? So you have a manager, and now you want to bring a second person into that department, and you want to put that person at the same level. A, who's in charge of that department? Who's going to be the one who the responsibility falls on, because you need somebody in charge of that department. So you could bring a manager in for programming or another one in for whatever, but you need somebody who is the responsible party for a department, i.e. the manager. So I don't understand. It's so illogical to me that you have a 1-person department. Now you're going to have a 2-person department and they're both going to be managers. Who's in charge?
I understand that the perspective you're looking
I
at it. I
disagree.
can't
I
say any
disagree
more
with
than
you.
I don't want to delay it. We hashed it out last time. I understand what you're saying. I just look at the world a little differently. And I think we'll leave it at that. We do not have a pending request to add another IT manager or another library director. I just wanted to get the sense of the board. We're not going to vote on anything. I wanted to get the sense of where this board was on filling these positions with more than 1 employee if circumstances came before us. Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. I understand your position. Any other questions for the board? Okay, I'm ready to move on from this topic. My sole purpose was to just get a sense of where the board's at, if it should come up in the future. So thanks everybody for thinking about that. And I do appreciate all the points of view that have been expressed. All right. We're going to move on to 5B, new business, IT department. Last night, I was contacted by Mr. Probst of the, I believe he's still chair of the Municipal Technology Committee. They have a role in technology acquisition in Southborough. They have a bylaw, which I'm ashamed to say I haven't read. And that led to a number of offline communications this morning. By offline, I mean outside of the meeting. MTC has an interest in what happens with the IT department. And I welcome Mr. Probst to come to our meeting if he had something he wanted to say. Ms. Hale, could you bring Mr. Probst into our meeting? Thank you so much. Welcome, Mr. Probst. Can you hear us?
I can, yeah, thank you. Thanks for.
Great, nice to see you. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for contacting me. So board members, you have in your packet a memo from Ms. Hale at page 9 and a proposed job description. It's a draft job description at pages 10 to 12 in the packet. So Vanessa, I think I'll turn the floor over to you if you want to give the background, including the action that occurred last night. I don't know, last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, Mr. Purple deferred to you, so I'll do likewise. But again, Mark, if you want to speak on this, however you guys want to handle it, you have the floor.
Sure, I'll open it up and then toss it to Mark to give you
I'm sorry,
more of a-
just before Vanessa starts, Madam Chair, I think you should bring Mr. Montijo into the room as well.
The guest of the hour, of course. I expected to just see him pop up. Yes. And this was something, thank you, Ms. Jasinski had been pressing us for, to please bring Mr. Montijo into the situation. I apologize, Mr. Montijo. That was a tremendous oversight. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm getting an error code when I try and bring over the IT manager. So for the time being, I'm going to give him permission to talk. So you won't see his face on camera until I can sort that out.
Well, we look forward to seeing him, and thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Purple. Very important. And I do apologize. It's nothing personal, Mr. Montijo.
Figures there'd be an IT problem when I come into the room.
I know. You and I will try and sort that out.
Yes, we will.
But just to keep the conversation moving along. So Jay, Mark, and myself have been spending a lot of time talking about the composition of a second employee in the IT department, which resulted in the draft job description that is in your packet. It also was reviewed and approved by the Board of Selectmen last night. What we're looking for from the Personnel Board is approval of the job description and the direction to give to me to go forward and go through the job analysis questionnaire, the JAQ process, as we have done in the past. Mr. Dietz and Chair Rosenblum have been very helpful in helping me grade those positions. So there's more than one person that is looking at the scoring mechanism for a new position in the SCP. We're talking about this now because we do want to get this on the special town meeting warrant to classify a new position, since it is a new title, not under an existing title similar to the discussion you just had. But there have been many conversations this morning as well. So I'll just pass it over to the town administrator now, and he can give you an update on his conversations.
Before Mr. Purple starts, I just wanted to make it clear while we're all together how the grading process would work, Vanessa, because I don't know how familiar Mr. Montijo or Mr. Probst would be with this. So when I came on the board, we had a classification and compensation, our current classification and compensation set up, the schedules that you see. And when a question would arise about whether or not a position was in the right category, whether it should be reclassified, or if we had a new position where it should go in the schedule, it was being handled by the consultant who recommended the current classification system. And at some point during my tenure, we decided to bring it in-house, and she has given us two tools to do that. And basically, we take the job description and we take all the data in the job description and we put it into a form called a JAQ. Although, as Mr. Dietz has shown us, we don't even really need the JAQ. We can take the data straight out of the job description, things such as level of education and responsibility. There's several key fields of information. And then there's a corresponding scoring tool. For each level, there's points, and then you run them through the magic machine. It's just a scoring sheet, and you come out with a grade that corresponds to our classification system. So Vanessa fulfills that function. She does the grading, and then two members of this board, Jason and Jay and myself, have done this before, although it could be anybody else on the personnel board. The magic number is 2. We're a board of 5 people. If 3 people do something, it has to be done in open meeting. So the way that we've sort of agreed to do this is we get 3 opinions. We get Vanessa, who's not a member of the board, and 2 members of the board because they are not a quorum. And then we present the results to the board. So that's how this would be handled. And a question has arisen, Mark, and maybe this is for discussion with you. Those tools that Joellen has given us, she considers them, Joellen's the consultant, she considers them proprietary, does not want them in our packet, doesn't want them discussed in open meeting. But I don't know if I can share them with other members outside my board. So that may be a question for Mark. But I just wanted to outline how the grading process would work. So thanks, Vanessa, and then I open it up to Mark.
Madam Chair, I think I'm actually going to defer my comments until after I hear everybody else speak.
Okay. Well, I think we want to know what you need us to do. So you just reiterating that you want us to approve a job description today and
Well,
then proceed to have the board authorize a rating and a classification for this.
In short, yes. But I guess to provide some level of context, so the Board of Selectmen unanimously approved the job description that you have before you last evening. I've spent a lot of time on the phone this morning, as I think you have, Madam Chair. I know that several people have, and I think there is some concern from the MTC, or at least Mr. Probst, the chair of MTC, that they had wanted more input into the job description. And I did have a conversation with Chairman Braccio this morning, and she doesn't want to see this process slow down so that you can have things ready for town meeting for any classification that you need to of the position. But she is willing to take up the position again at their meeting next week on the 22nd to either accept some minor revisions to the job description or to reaffirm the board's decision they made last night, but would ask that the personnel board continue to move this forward, and hopefully whether you approve the job description conditionally upon further review from the Board of Selectmen, but at least to begin moving it forward in the JAQ process.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. Yeah, so to provide a little background, Ms. Jasinski and I were at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last night. I had an interest in seeing how this was handled. As Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale have told you, the job description was unanimously approved by the Board of Selectmen. It was my understanding that there was MTC buy-in on not just the title of the job, but the job description had been reviewed. I cannot say for certainty that Ms. Hale or Mr. Purple stated that on the record. I do not remember. I'll have to listen to a recording. I just had the impression. I don't know what impression the board members had. And then I heard from Mr. Probst that maybe that was not the case, and I will let him speak for himself, so that there might be some question about whether or not there's some input that should be forthcoming from MTC back to the Board of Selectmen that was not, and hence whether this is ripe for us to review or whether or not we want to make a conditional approval. So one thing that I haven't heard anybody mention is there were some questions from the Board of Selectmen about the job description, and one of them was important to me. I believe it was raised by Ms. Melanowski, and this is on page 2 of the job description. As currently written, the requirement is bachelor's degree or higher preferred, but not required. And Ms. Melanowski asked why. And I thought this was important because level of education is something that this board looks at and that will feed into. And I would like Mr. Montijo, I thought he did a good explanation explaining to people like myself who don't really understand the world of technology why they wrote the job description as they did. So Mr. Montijo, if you could speak to the educational requirement.
Yeah, I mean, as I stated last night, you can find a person who has 5 or 10 years experience in the field and has worked in all these different platforms that I work in currently, and not have the bachelor's degree, but they may have certifications galore that could definitely, assist in the situations that, I work with every single day. And also the customer service experience in the background to assist that as well. I mean, if they have that personable skills to speak with, all of the members here that I'm talking to today, and also with all the town employees, that's also key as well. Being able to present yourself and solve problems. Sometimes a bachelor's degree doesn't bring you that level. Granted, a bachelor's degree can bring you that level as well. So having all of that in the same suite would be, great. But, in the IT world, it can be a different balance of having all of these certifications and having that great skill behind you to get the job done. So that's how I feel about the bachelor's degree sense. And again, after talking to Matt as well, it could be something that would be strongly preferred within that application as well. But again, it's that's my stance on it. That's how I feel about it. It feels like it's, that's the way the IT world works.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Montijo. This was something that had come up last night, and I thought it was important. And it's one of the factors that will feed into how many points this position has and where it ends up getting graded. As a result of conversations that have happened since 8 o'clock last night and now, do you perceive changing the educational recommending or accepting changes to that? Or Mr. Montijo, are you happy with it where it is?
I am happy with it where it is, but can it be strengthened? Yes. Can there be changes? Yes. And after conversations with Matt as well, there can be things that we can tweak and make look enticing, or at least grab the right audience. But yes, I mean, it was a lot of work put into this to get this together. So, I mean, as it is right now, I am in a good place with it. And again, with tweaks that we can have, by the MTC, I'm definitely accepting to that as well.
I'm going to ask my board if they want to speak, or if you would like to hear from Mr. Probst, because it was as a result of his calling me last night, which led to a bunch of, my concern was, if MTC is a legitimate stakeholder in this process, and again, there's an MTC statute, I have not done statutory analysis. If they are a bona fide interested third party, which they are, they're a stakeholder in this, they claim a right to input in it. And if they have not been heard before the Board of Selectmen as fully as they wish to be, my feeling was that would influence our board, because what we're hearing is that the Board of Selectmen approved this job description last night unanimously. So what I was seeking to understand through those phone calls that Mr. Purple alluded to is whether or not the Board of Selectmen was going to take this up again, reopen it, whether or not we should table it for the time being. And I guess I'm a little confused about where all the stakeholders, other than personnel, have fallen out on this. I'm hearing that Mr. Montijo is happy with it, but may tweak it. The Board of Selectmen may hear it again. And Mr. Purple is asking us to conditionally approve it, but it may change. And if the changes are in any way significant on 8 or 9 fields that we have to rate it on, then any rating and classification we do today may be invalid. So I guess, would the board like to hear from Mr. Probst? Do you have questions at this time? Should I open it up to Mr. Probst? And then maybe we can decide where we want to go. I think I'm seeing a little shaking of heads.
Let's open it up.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Mr. Probst, would you like to speak, please? We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to applaud and grateful for all of Vanessa, Mark, and Jay's work on this, because the MTC is 1,000% behind getting another person on board. Jason Mr. Montijo is indeed underwater. We are strong advocates of getting an additional person on board. There's really two purposes in our mind for this position. One is allowing Mr. Montijo some room to breathe, because right now he's underwater there's so many things that need to be done. The second position, which we've discussed second purpose for this position, which we've discussed countless times, is to solve what we call the key man risk, which is solving for if in case something happens to Mr. Montijo or he wins the lottery, that we have coverage as a town, and the town can have what we call business continuity, the town technology operations. And the more we digitize our operations and more we have based on technology, the more critical it will be that we have staff that can cover not only the low-level help desk, but also ongoing patching and maintenance, and in some cases strategy, be able to handle strategy needs. So we're strong advocates to provide Mr. Montijo the level of support he needs to have somebody that can operate at his level, basically not necessarily be, there's not somebody co-equal to him. It definitely still reports to him and assist him. But in the case of any disaster, calamities, etc., somebody who can step into his shoes. And so the way to truly prove that is to say, how equal is the job description to what Mr. Montigo's job description was? And today, and unfortunately, so Jason provided us, sent me a copy of the job description, and it was my fault that we did not review that in time for the Board of Selectmen meeting. So I missed that opportunity. I apologize for that. But we would be interested in reviewing and providing input back to Mr. Purple and Mr. Montico to hopefully bring it more in line with what Mr. Montico's current job description is. But again, we don't want to in any way slow down the process or jeopardize in any way this getting on the docket for town meeting. So if there's anything that would jeopardize this, additional few days or week of review, we definitely would not want to jeopardize that, getting it on to October docket. So we'd definitely be willing to satisfied with the job description as is, if that's something that would be put in jeopardy.
Thank you, Mr. Probst. Are you finished?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just in terms of meeting, the board has scheduled meetings for August 4th and August 18th. Primarily 2 meetings to discuss this, to discuss whatever we're going to do for town meeting and to get this wrapped the month before, because there's lead time needed for the bylaw. With an October 4th town meeting schedule, we were discussing this at the end of the last meeting. I would anticipate Mark and Vanessa would be asking us for the SAP probably 3 weeks in advance. So we're almost backing up to Labor Day. So that's why the board scheduled 2 meetings in August to conclude whatever they're going to do with this. So I guess I don't feel like I'm on real strong footing as to what Ms. Braccio wants to do with her board. And I don't feel like I entirely understand whether or not this job description may change. One thing I think this board could do, because it's not costly to do so, is proceed to analyze this job description and rate and grade it with not written in stone, but we could take what's here and Vanessa and I could go through the analysis and tell you where this falls out. And maybe that would be a very helpful thing for those who think that it's not where it needs to be. And it, as Vanessa can explain, it's a pretty cut and dried analysis. And where we've gotten into trouble before, because we had an instance where Jay and Vanessa and myself, Jay Dietz, graded a position. We came out with 3 different places. And that was because the folks who did the JAQ analysis did not match the JD. So the job description said one thing, the JAQ said another thing. So one of us graded it by the job description strictly and came up with one number. One of us looked at the JAQ because that's the process that we understood it to be, but the JAQ and the JD said different things about years of experience and level of education. And then a third person had an even different level because they understood the position in the real world, did more than what was on paper. So it has to be done strictly. So in this case, I don't know, Vanessa, if you're nodding in agreement, I would tend to want to rate and classify this based on the job description itself. I'm not even going to ask for a JAQ. You and I look at this job description and pull the data right out of there so there's no question of interpretation. Does that make sense? I'll let Vanessa speak to that.
Yes, that's, as you said, that's a little different than what we've done in the past, but, we do want to make sure we're basing our decisions on the job description that's been written and preliminarily approved, I would say. So I think that would be wise. And, I would be in favor of doing that sooner rather than later, so we can keep this whole process moving forward. I did want to just note the Board of Selectmen last night changed the date of the special town meeting. It's now Monday, November 1st.
What?
They voted last night to move the date of the special town meeting to November 1st.
Wow. Okay. So that timetable I just gave you in 2 meetings in August is no longer timely. Well, it could be, but wow. Okay. What is that date again for the record? November 1st?
Monday, November 1st.
At what time, please?
They didn't choose a time yet. I would assume 7 p.m.
Thank
And
you.
it will be an indoor town meeting, by the way.
All right.
Thank God.
So now you're backing us up and you would need the SAP 3 weeks before November 1st, roughly.
Yes.
Okay. So the board can discuss whether or not they want to change that under calendar. So I've talked enough. I'm a little confused. I'm happy to hear from board members about the job description, about what you've heard from Mr. Probst, your thoughts on how to proceed. Mr.
Yeah, I
Rubenstein.
mean, given that we're at least now scheduled to meet on August 4th, I guess I don't see what the need is for us to do anything at this point. Seems to me by August 4th, the Board of Selectmen will have had another opportunity to visit this job description, either change it or don't change it. And then we'll know when we meet on the 4th, what is the job description we're being asked to vote on, rather than, yeah, we'll approve this one, but if you make changes, okay, we'll let some, it's just, I don't see what the need is for us to do anything right now, given the timing. So my preference would be to just kick this to the 4th and revisit it at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Anybody else? Comments?
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Barry on that, but also point out that we just told that there were some recommendations that could be made, but didn't have to be made if in fact it delayed anything. And those suggestions now wouldn't be delaying anything.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Anybody else from Personnel Board?
I agree with Mr. Rubenstein as well.
Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. Mr. Dietz? Can't hear you, Mr. Dietz.
Sorry, I agree as well.
All right. Is there any opposition? In all these discussions, it occurs to me that it might be helpful if we could at least tell folks that this current job description falls at a certain level. Does anybody on Personnel Board have a problem authorizing me to meet with Vanessa and at least level what's here?
No,
By shake of heads,
No problem.
you're good with that? Vanessa, you and I were already going to meet after this meeting to discuss benefits. How about if we just sit down and bang out a quick, just for the benefit of Mr. Probst and Mr. Purple and the Board of Selectmen and everybody else, just to do this exercise. It'll take us about
That's
10
fine.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. We can discuss offline whether we're meeting by Zoom or in person. All right. So a sense of the board is we will take this up on August 4th. We will have a fresh report from Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale on what action, if any, the Board of Selectmen have taken. In the meantime, Ms. Hale and I will rate this position. Mr. Probst, you are invited to come back with us on the 4th. But while we're here, I would like to give Mr. Purple, Ms. Hale, Mr. Montijo, any substantive input from this board, perhaps not on IT matters, if you want to wait to hear from the Board of Selectmen, but anything else about this job description that you have questions that you would like addressed. the substance of the job description?
No, I'm all set at this point. Like I said, I think that the selectmen, from my
No, I'm sorry,
conversation.
Mark. I was asking my board members if they have any
Oh.
input for you to take back to the drawing table. Sorry, love to hear from you in a minute. Just any members,
No.
you know, much as the Board of Selectmen had questions about education level or functions, or if there's any input from this board as a personnel board. Mr. Dietz usually has a thing or two to say about how something was written or expressed, so.
Nope, I'm good. I'm good
You're
right
good.
now.
Okay.
Yep.
Everybody's good? No substantive input? Okay, Mark, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please, you have the floor.
No, thank you, Betsy. I was just gonna reiterate, so, you know, the selectman chair, Ms. Braccio, you know, is gonna be, reaching out to Mr. Probst and letting him know that if MTC has any comments that they want to offer in terms of the job description, they can submit those, to myself and to, Mr. Montijo, and then, that, you know, any revisions and everything will be brought to, suggested revisions to the job description will be brought to the selectmen's meeting next week on the 22nd. And the board will either entertain changes at that point, or they will reaffirm the decision that they made last night. So you will have what is to be the final version from the, or the final decision from the appointing authority for your next meeting.
Great, and we've scheduled 2 meetings, and we'll take this up again on August 4th. All right, anybody else have anything on this topic?
Nope.
All right. Thank you for your input. I think this matter is tabled to August 4th, with the exception of the rating. Jay, I assume that you are, Jay Dietz, I assume you are busy this afternoon and do not wish to be my +1 on rating this position?
Correct, sorry.
Okay. All right. Ms. Jazinski, would you be interested, since you were planning to meet with Ms. Hale and myself?
Sure, no problem.
Okay. All right. We can take that up at our after meeting. Ms. Jazinski can be my, unless somebody else really wants to rate and classify this position. Dave, Barry, I don't want you to cut you out of the loop.
No,
All
no
right.
problem.
Dorianne, you can be my +1. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so moving on, we have one last item of new business. And that is performance evaluations FY22 and beyond. Something we've all been thinking about, what should be the role of the personnel board moving forward, and the self-evaluation form that is in your packet starting at page 13. So in the discussions about the performance evaluations this year, question came up about whether or not whether this board wanted to see the employee self-appraisal form. We noted that the library employees use it. I found it helpful. Vanessa has supplied us, thank you very much, with 2 forms. The one at page 13 appears to be one that was developed by Mr. Milholland, formerly of Personnel Board, longtime member of Personnel Board. And then there's a second form. And I don't know, Vanessa, do you know who developed the second form? The one that's in the packet starting at page 14?
4. That was developed by sort of an internal working committee. And the idea was that the long form that you see with the 11 questions, that was what we were using for several years, but some people felt like, well, why would an incumbent employee fill out the same thing every single year? So they wanted a variety of questions based on, you know, year to year, how long you had been employed. So some new employees do still use the long form, and it's, you know, very helpful to get their perspective. But that's why there are 2 different forms. Neither one of them are being used consistently by every single person. That's really the guidance I'm looking for from the board. Do you want this to be a mandatory part of the review process?
Gotcha. And by long form, you mean the one on page 13, the 11 questions? Or by long form, do you mean the one that's pages 14 to 17?
No, the 11 question form.
Is considered by you to be the long form. Okay, thank you. So we've seen these self-appraisals before. I think in general, they're a great idea. But I thought before we went about to dictate what should be submitted, we should talk in general about our future vis-a-vis performance evaluations. So I open it up for thoughts and feelings and expressions of where you think we ought to go from here. We've all had, I think who's our newest member? Is that you, Dorian, or maybe
No,
Dave?
it's Dave.
Dave, how long have you been out with us, Mr. Nixon?
Long enough.
Long enough. All right. Good answer.
What is it, 3 years now?
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. I think the self-appraisal forms are good up to a point. You know, nobody sees ourselves the same way we see ourselves. And I think it's very, very difficult to get an accurate sense just through questions. It's more direct contact with people and sitting down and talking with them. I think a lot of times people come up with, standard type answers, knowing what people are looking for that are going to be reviewing the form. The question is, how do you balance out the self-appraisal form with the supervisor's ratings and appraisal?
I mean, I'll speak to the broader question of what our role is in performance evaluations. For me, we spend a tremendous amount of time reading, reviewing these, and I'm not sure to what end. We've gone through this process. We see that everybody is going to end up getting the same increase. Performance evaluation is a management tool. I don't consider myself a manager. I don't manage these people. And I'm reading a lot about people, a lot of which means nothing to me. Everyone's doing a great job. I certainly, it's important that these performance evaluations be done and that they be reviewed at a management level, but I'm not sure what added benefit I'm providing by reading them, other than spending a lot of my time learning about people and what they do, which I guess is helpful. But from a cost benefit point of view, I think the cost to me far outweighs whatever benefit I'm getting. And I don't think we're providing any benefit to the town, frankly. People are going to get their raises. That's fine. If someone's performing at a minimal level, which everybody in this town is performing well above a minimal level, apparently. So personally, I'd be in favor of us getting out of the personnel evaluation review business and simply requiring something like a certification from the manager that a successful performance evaluation was done. Just my point of view.
I'm going to agree with Barry. Completely agree with Barry.
I like that idea.
I completely agree with him.
Great minds work alike. I was just thinking that this is where my proposed town org chart will come into play. We will make up a list of managers of SAP employees. Barry and I will develop a certificate form and we'll ask them to sign it. And COLA raises will be granted upon certification. I couldn't agree more with what Barry said. It's a management function. We aren't managers. I've seen personnel board deal with this very awkwardly since before I got on the board, watching personnel try to deal with this. But the answer is not to put it on Ms. Hale and Mr. Purple because they don't have jurisdiction over certain departments. So we'll have a bolus of certifications from Mark or Vanessa, some from independent boards and committees, library trustees, planning board, and we'll continue to look at the data supplied by Mr. Ballantyne and recommend a COLA raise. Would that be the sense of the board?
Yes.
Yes.
So in light of that, I would not, we can't absolve without changing the SAP, we can't absolve ourselves of the responsibility under 7A. No raises unless receipt, let's take a look at what it says, because maybe we want to change this, ask the town to change this for October town meeting. 7A of the SAP. Every employee eligible annually for consideration of a raise, only one a year, except as may be authorized by us. Retroactive an evaluation of the employee's performance in a format approved by the personnel board must accompany a request for an increase in the case of all employees. So think about whether or not we want to ask town meeting to change that language to something like notification that the department head has received or has completed. Take a look at, it's the third paragraph of section 3. And I welcome our administrators to suggest something to us if they like, and we can take that up at August 4th.
I'd like to spend a little time just seeing if there's any overlap with other sections that may be related to this, perhaps for your August meeting, just to cover all the bases.
Sure. As currently written, it sounds like we need to receive a performance evaluation, not just a certification that one has been done. So based on this discussion, I think a tweak to this. And I am happy to stand up at town meeting and explain that personnel board, this is a management function and we are not the managers. We don't know many of the employees. So for all the reasons Barry so eloquently stated, and I'm seeing the nodding of heads. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add? No.
I agree with Barry 100%.
Yep. All right. So, and then we need to take a look at the policies that we have in place related to submitting performance evaluations, and because we're still going to be setting a level for raises, right? So let's take a look at that for August 4th, please, as Vanessa has suggested. Take a look at all our functions, take a look at section 7, and bring recommendations for what we need to ask town meeting to change in October. All right. So based on this, I don't think we should make any recommendation regarding self-evaluations. If we're getting out of the management of performance evaluations, I think we should leave that up to the board. Now, however, we just passed a couple of new policies. I just thank Vanessa for posting them to the town website. Who needs a review? Who doesn't need a review? I think we should re-examine those in light of. So please take a look at the town, the personnel board webpage on the town's website. Take a look at the policies we just passed relating to. We had the issue that came up of who's eligible for a raise. I guess some of it relates just to raises. Who's eligible for a raise? So the new employee who's been here 3 months, can they get a raise? That's still an issue because we're still going to be handling raises. So we've made a step today in terms of reaching agreement that we're going to get out of the performance evaluation process, but we're not all the way out because we are responsible for the raises. So please take a look at the policies and the SAP, and we'll focus on that on August 4th. Thank you all. I think that's it for the agenda. Any other business that has come before any board member the last 48 hours? I have nothing.
Nope.
Board calendar, we previously scheduled meetings for August 4th and August 18th. Are those still good?
Yep.
I would ask the board to stick with those, even though the rescheduling of town meeting has given us a little, I'm sorry, Dorian. Were you
I
speaking?
didn't say
I
anything.
know I.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I know I definitely cannot make the 18th.
Can't make the 18th.
No, I'll have to, and I'll check on the 4th. I'll have to get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Jay. So we have a month's, our teacher just gave us a month's extension on the SAP, but we still have the same issue that I'm generally not around in September. So with the board's indulgence, I think we'll just proceed as if we were going to get things done. I may be able to make a meeting in September, somewhere in between Labor Day, 2 Jewish holidays, and a week's vacation, if need be, to add something, but I would ask the board to stick with the schedule that we came up with. Dave, does August work for you if we're meeting virtually?
Yep,
Great.
fine.
All right. That said, we may need to work something in to review something for the SAP in September. That might be able to be done with my esteemed clerk, Ms. Jasinski, or Mr. Rubenstein, somebody standing in for me. We'll discuss. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Anything else? All right, we'll see you back here. Dorian and Vanessa are going to hang around for a business meeting after this meeting. Everybody else, thank you very much. We are adjourned, gavelled out at 1:21 p.m.